This is Michael Popok, Legal AF After Dark. You know what that means? We're on to the January 6th election interference case presided over by Judge Chutkan. We got a D.C. Court of Appeals that's considering a gag order against Donald Trump and has temporarily stayed it. We've got a judge who's moving forward with her jury selection as early as February. We got Karen Friedman Agnifilo, my co-anchor, former prosecutor, and me debating what we're observing so we can bring it to you without blowing smoke or sunshine. Take a listen to our most recent analysis. Let's go to someplace that we think makes sense, but Donald Trump hates, which is the D.C. election interference case presided over by Judge Chutkan. We got two things to talk about as we wrap up our midweek edition. One is, and you did a nice hot take on this, and so I'll let you lead there, on the we got the briefing that's going on at the D.C. Court of Appeals, or D.C. Court of Appeals, about the gag order. Chutkan, reminder, put in a gag order, reinstated it to stop violent rhetoric and attacks by Donald Trump on witnesses, prosecutors, families, staff, and the like. She left herself out of it, even though she's been violently attacked, including by one of Donald Trump's followers who left an assassination message on her chamber voicemail. But, you know, she's like, I got my own federal marshals for protection. I'm okay. But that issue as to whether that's a First Amendment right for Donald Trump to violently and to attack Jack Smith, including what he's been doing right up until the moment of their decision. There's one more brief left. It's Donald Trump's. Then on the 20th of November, there's going to be oral argument. It's not going to be televised, but we will be able to get an audio recording of it, and we'll talk about it at that time. Talk about that, and the second thing we'll talk about before we wrap is the judge, getting ready, including the motion to dismisses that she has on file, and getting ready for her jury trial in March. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, so Jack Smith's team filed an appellate brief, and they put. I love when they put the question before the court so perfectly and so clearly and concisely, because then we all know what we're looking at and what the issue is. And he basically wrote, "Did Judge Chutkan permissibly issue an order under Local Criminal Rule 57.7 sub C, prohibiting parties and their counsel from making extrajudicial statements, meaning outside of court, targeting certain trial participants while expressly leaving the defendant free to make statements, quote, criticizing the government generally, including the current administration or the DOJ, statements asserting that the defendant is innocent of the charges against him, or that his prosecution is politically motivated, or statements criticizing the campaign platforms or policies of his current political rivals." And so what he's basically saying is, what we're here for, Judge, is to the court, is this very limited gag order that prohibits Donald Trump from speaking and targeting certain court and trial participants. Is that illegal, especially when it still allows him to criticize lots and lots of people, including Mike Pence, who is going to be a witness in this case because he's a political rival. So I think they characterize this very well, because they set the issue out very clearly that this is narrow. Okay, this restraint on speech, this gag order, is very narrowly tailored, and they put it right up front. So their brief is, I thought, really good. It reminds the court that, there's one defendant, 4 charges, and although he's not charged with an insurrection, the indictment absolutely alleges that he's responsible for the events of January 6th and the lives that were lost, and that the trial is going to start March 1st, and we're picking a jury February 9th. That is right around the corner. I mean, I can't believe how quickly that's going to come. We're about to hit Thanksgiving, the holidays, New Year's, and then boom, here we are. So they also lay out the defendant's extrajudicial or outside of court statements, and they did a really good job at summarizing exactly where we are. So he said that the judge has reminded the parties that we have to ensure the integrity of the case, but we also have to prevent a carnival atmosphere and prevent an unchecked trial by media rather than a trial by impartial jury, right? That's really important. And that the judge admonished a general word of caution to Trump in the beginning, basically saying, in order to ensure the orderly administration of justice, we're not going to allow you to intimidate witnesses and threaten or prejudice jurors. Entirely reasonable. Most judges don't need to remind defendants of that, but she felt she needed to. But both before and after the admonition, and Smith points this out, that that Trump persistently used the social media platforms that he's on to make comments. And 3 days after the indictment is when he made the famous, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you," and also used disparaging and inflammatory language to target the court, the special counsel, trial witnesses. And Jack Smith doesn't name anyone, but he describes who they are when he puts in his motion this information. So he puts in there that Trump called Judge Chutkan a fraud and a hack, called Smith deranged thugs and lunatics, has gone after his wife and family. He's accused, made lies about Smith going to the White House when he knows that was false. He called Pence delusional, not a good person, who made up stories about Trump. And he called the former Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's a trial witness, that he should be punished by death, and that Meadows is a liar. So, he sets up all of the various statements, kind of like, I wrote something actually on MeidasTouch.com with all the threats, et cetera. And Jack Smith, it was the same kind of things that Jack Smith was doing, just in order of who he's going after, what he's saying, and also pointed out what has happened as a result of Trump's comments. So, for example, the day after Trump wrote, "I'm coming after," the "I'm coming after you" posting, that's when one of his followers, called Chutkan's Chambers, called her a stupid slave N-word, and "we're going to kill you, and you're going to be personally targeted," and all this kind of stuff. Called her the B word, and Smith also, again, went on about all the other threats, like Ruby Freeman, Shea Moss, and talked about how so many people have needed extra police protection, security, and even talked about things happening not in this case. He talked about Alvin Bragg and the baseball bat and the threats and the stuff to him. Also talked about Fonnie Willis and those threats. And also talked about how Trump has said in Caitlin Collins on CNN town hall that his followers listen to him like no one else. So I think Jack Smith just did a great job, or I should say his team did a great job spelling out all of these issues for the appellate court and making sure that it's in the record. And then really went into the law. And it was really interesting to read about this, because it's kind of a history of the First Amendment, and all of the different parameters of the First Amendment, and how the court said that while speech critical of the state lies at the heart of the First Amendment, at some point, defendants' targeted disparagement of government officials can go from permissible criticism to encouraging harm against them, and that this targeted disparagement poses a danger, even when it does not explicitly call for violence. And used, Popok, your favorite quote that you have mentioned many times, that the King Henry II's remark, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest," which resulted in the death of Thomas A. Becket. So Smith, and he quoted that in his appellate brief. And basically, they pointed out that there's uncontradicted evidence showing that when the defendant has singled out a particular person in his public statements, it has led to them being threatened and harassed. And he should be free to say things, but not no matter what, and not about whoever he wants. And that this is no longer speculative the way Trump likes to say it is, because every time he says something happens, right? People get threats, people get death threats, people need security, and that Judge Chutkan's narrowly tailored gag order allows him to still criticize Mike Pence, who's his political rival, but also protects the administration of justice and potential witnesses. And so, as you know, right now the gag order is paused. Um, and that's because while they get ready to argue this and to see what happened, but during this pause, right, since it has been paused, Trump called Jack Smith deranged and crooked, and also included his wife and family in the attacks. And I think that might have might actually push things over the edge. He also warned, again, very recently, in the middle of all of this appeal, that Jack Smith and other DOJ officials, if he's elected president, will end up in a mental institution. He also called these really excellent public servants who I have so much respect for. Their lawyers who have worked in the Justice Department, Andrew Weissman and Lisa Monaco. He's called them a team of losers and misfits, and I have to say, and then he said they're going to end up suffering a horrible disease and in a mental institution. I don't know. I just think he's going after everybody, and I think that potentially that they're going to find that this gag order is actually narrowly tailored and appropriate. And one of the things that will be interesting that I think will be, what test will the DC Circuit apply to this gag order? Because since it's a First Amendment case, right, it has to be narrowly tailored. That's a term of art when you're talking about the First Amendment. And Jack Smith says that the test is whether these extrajudicial speech poses a substantial likelihood of material prejudice. That's to the trial. That's typically what the standard would be when restricting speech in this kind of setting. Trump, however, is saying that no, this should be a higher test to meet, right? Which is one that when you want to restrict the press, not just regular people, and that's the clear and present danger test, which is a little higher standard. Smith says, you know what? We got it either way. So either way, we meet both standards, whether it's substantial likelihood of material prejudice or clear and present danger. Either way, we've got it. We made it, and so therefore this should stand. And so I thought it was really, really excellently done. What did you think?
No, I did. I think they're going to lose. I think they're going to get gagged again. I think that there are, as Judge Chutkan has laid out, there are bright lines that there are just certain amount of extrajudicial outside the courtroom rhetoric that is not protected by the First Amendment, as the First Amendment comes into conflict with the Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial. Donald Trump doesn't realize it, but what the courts are really trying to do, pardon me, is protect Donald Trump from himself. He's polluting the jury pool. He is polluting the justice system in a way that could ultimately backfire on him by having jurors that are afraid of him, and that doesn't mean they're going to hang, no pun intended, that they're not going to rule on one of the counts. It just means that they may actually rule against him because they're so afraid of him, and that he comes off as such a tyrant and unhinged that he's actually undermining his own right to a fair trial every day in every way. And that is what Judge Chutkan has made clear from day one as the trial judge. Her primary concern is the protection of the process, the judicial system, and to make sure there's a fair trial that results from it. And I don't think anything that she has ruled with her narrow gag order about violent rhetoric based on the evidence that was presented to her and that she observed is going to be overturned, or that decision is going to be overturned by the DC Court of Appeals, certainly not the three judges that have been chosen. I think it's I'll put it this way, it's a very favorable panel of three judges on the DC Court of Appeals to hear this issue. And I would be, to continue a phrase from tonight, shocked if the gag order wasn't put back in place. I don't care what test you use. Ultimately, as you said during the Georgia election interference segment, why does he get away with what a normal defendant would never be able to get away with? Or to paraphrase Judge Chutkan, in that same hearing where she made the comment about the assassination of the Archbishop of Canterbury. What name for me, Mr. Lauro, the lawyer for Donald Trump, tell me a case in which a defendant such as yours would be able to attack the prosecutor and make all these comments and not be remanded back into the custody of the federal marshals and be back in the jail. Give me that case. I'm not aware of it. And to which he said, well, leading candidate could win the presidency. And the judge has already cut the legs out from under that argument from day one. Doesn't care a whit what the day job for this defendant is. He is, as she likes to remind everybody every time she issues an order, he is a 4-time, at least in her courtroom, felony indicted participant on the wrong end of the V in the criminal justice system, which continues his freedom and liberty at the very moment is at her discretion. And it's always, whenever she does her docket entry, she always reminds everybody he's out on a personal recognizance bond that could be revoked at any moment if he continues to act out in a way that undermines the justice system. And we know he's going to do that, and that's his plan, because he's been trying to undermine every branch of our government, every system of our democracy. That's how he got indicted. He was undermining the electoral process and the peaceful transfer of power in a way that our founding fathers could never have envisioned that a former then losing president would ever try to cling to power by throwing over the game board of our democracy to try to stay in power. People might say, well, why can he run again? Why can he run if he's convicted? Why can he run if he's in jail? Because our founding fathers, as much foresight as they had, as many things on that hot summer that they built into the Bill of Rights and to the Constitution, they couldn't envision this. And so we're going to have to reshape our democracy, reinstall the guardrails to protect against the next Trump, or Trump, the restoration, God forbid, of Trump. But
what does the Supreme Court do, though?
I mean, the Supreme Court has not generally ruled in favor of Donald Trump on many things. Jan 6th. I mean, there's always two holdouts. I mean, I could write it now. I could write the dissents right now. It's Alito and Thomas. Everybody else, because Roberts is able to hopefully get them there, including Kavanaugh, including even Amy
Coney Barrett.
There's so many. Amy Berman Jackson is another judge. Amy Coney Barrett. They're like, I don't think that's appropriate for a president, the ex-president, to do. So he's never really won there on things that matter. So I'm hoping if that history is prologue, they will continue to think this is an out-of-control lunatic, except for Alito and Thomas, that think it's totally appropriate, everything he does, doesn't matter what he could set the White House on fire. And I think Alito and Thomas would find some way to say that was appropriate political First Amendment speech. Well, there is an example of what we do every week on Legal AF, the leading podcast at the intersection of what? Law, politics, and justice. You know it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, welcome to Legal AF. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, welcome back. Use this clip to help us grow the network and our show's audience. Send it to people that you care about. Send it to people that you want to hope change their mind on the other side of the aisle. It's a little podlet, right? A little 10-minute clip of a larger show we call Legal AF. Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, only on the MeidasTouch Network. And then we do hot takes, the leaders of Legal AF, about every hour at the intersection of law, politics, and justice, one place, the MeidasTouch Network. So tune in there too. Until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Hey, Midas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.